Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Life Money Balance Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Preston Cherry, where we let your life lead your money, not your money lead your life, where your money is working concurrently to help you. There it is over there to help you achieve your life design. We are in for a special treat today. So we always chopping it up about a great conversation, and no one other better to talk about your retirement income, your retirement portfolios, what you can do to ease your anxiety and worry about outliving your money and just using all the fruits of your labor for all these years to go into retirement with a little bit of confidence, with some sort of flexible strategy and just a little bit of a how-to, right? And even if you're saving up, this show is geared to a lot of Gen X folks, and folks is like, I'm going to outlive my money and all that. And so what do I do? And what am I going to do when I retire? So all these questions tend to be answered when you Google it by the 4% rule. And the mastermind behind the 4% rule about what you can do to generate a confident, I put that in air quote, confident retirement lifestyle, retirement income, is Mr. Bill Bengen. Bill, I was just saying in the green room, thank you for all you've done in the profession for people out in the world about instilling some confidence and clarity with retirement income. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure. It's been a great ride for 30 years, and it just gets more fun as it goes on. Just seems to be more to learn and more to discover.
Right. Now, you're a master of handling, some pushback on the 4% rule, which is a guideline. So there's been a lot of misconceptions about the rule. First of all, it's a guideline and it allows for flexibility. But why don't you just kick it off? And there's no way better than to hear from the person who created it. So what is the 4% rule?
Okay. First of all, I didn't create the 4% rule as such. The name, at my research back in the early 90s, I looked at a very simple situation. I was trying to determine on a very preliminary basis, because I had never done any of this stuff before, in the worst case, what was the highest withdrawal rate that you could have based on history. It turns out the person who retired in the late 60s ran into a buzzsaw of terrible stock market conditions, a couple of bear markets back to back, and then very high inflation, both of which are devastating for retirees. And out of that, I came out with a number, 4.15%, kind of like a Social Security kind of system where you start with a certain dollar amount first year and then you increase with inflation each year. And somewhere along the way, they got knocked down to 4%, rounded off, and then it became a rule. I don't use the term rule that often because I study in my research about 400 retirees historically, retiring from January 1st, 1926, first day of every quarter to date. That's about 400 people. And only one of those retirees, 1 out of 400, is stuck with what's called the 4% rule, which I've since upgraded to 4.7%. So all the others had higher withdrawals, and some of them had much higher. So I think we need to keep that rule in perspective. It's a rule if you accept certain restrictions and assumptions, but most people will be able to do much better than that.
Right. And so there's a couple of things there, Bill, which is I love reframing the rule. I know the media got a hold of that too after all these years. It's catchy. It is. It's a framework. It's a guidepost about creating a retirement income using your portfolio to fund your lifestyle over a period of time, with the hope that, say, if you do, or like you said, your assumptions, you have a few assumptions. It's giving folks just some guidance on how you may be able to do that. And one of your assumptions was like the portfolio makeup. Can we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I studied what's the optimum mix of investments to have in your portfolio, to generate the highest withdrawal rate. That's really important. And it was very, very interesting when I first took a look at it and I threw in different percentages of stocks, different percentages of bonds, different percentages of cash. It turns out between like 45% stocks and about 70% stocks, with the rest primarily being bonds, it didn't really affect your withdrawal rate at all. It was about the same. It was about, in my early research, about 4.15%. So that you can be a little bit more conservative if you want, have 45% stocks, or a little bit more aggressive, 70%, whichever suits yourself. You got basically with about the same withdrawal rate. The important thing is to build a diversified portfolio. Don't put all those eggs in one basket, because it will not be fun when things turn against you.
Right, right. And so this is why, Bill, I interpreted the 4% rule, which is a guidepost, a framework, to where you can build your portfolio how that's to your risk tolerance, your risk capacity, your life stage in life. So to your point, build a diversified portfolio that fits what your time frame is, what your goals are, and your risk profile is, and then assign a withdrawal rate over time that will match where you are in retirement, and you have a little bit of flexibility. It allows for flexibility, doesn't it?
Absolutely. A lot of it, once again, a lot of it depends upon how long you're planning for. The 4% rule is based on 30 years of retirement, but not everybody is going to be in retirement 30 years. Some people may want to be in it a lot longer. That gives you a lower withdrawal rate. And actually, you need a portfolio that's heavier in stocks if you're going to go for a longer time. If on the other hand, you're 90 years old and just starting your retirement planning, good. Yeah. Kudos to you for retiring at age 90. And let's say you estimate you have 10 years of life ahead. You don't want to have any stocks at all in your portfolio, really. And your withdrawal rate is probably closer to 9% rather than 4% number. So things change a lot depending upon what your assumptions are.
Right. And also, we're adapting the 4% rule to current economic conditions and forecasts, portfolio allocation, time horizon, risks. So when the public are able to adjust their retirement income and you're trying to determine your withdrawal rate, there is some flexibility, including increasing it in some years in order for it to adapt. So let's talk about that adaptability, because you did say that in some years you can go up towards 7 or 8, perhaps even 10% just for a little bit, and then you may have to readjust that the next year. So let's unpack that.
Yeah, sure. I took a look at all these 400 retirees, and the average withdrawal rate for all those retirees is, believe it or not, 7%, which is a lot higher enough. So just the average retiree. But I found there are two very, very important factors that affect what your withdrawal rate will be. One is how expensive are stocks at the time you retire. Why is that important? Well, because we know that if we get hit with a big bear market early in retirement, it damages your portfolio and reduces your withdrawal rate substantially. And the more expensive stocks are, the more likely it is to have a bear market early in retirement. So that's very important. You got to look at how expensive stocks are when you retire. The other factor is inflation. Remember, under the way we set up the 4% rule is that we increase our dollar withdrawals every year, like giving ourselves a cost of living adjustment, just like Social Security. So if you have very high inflation, particularly early in retirement, you're increasing those withdrawals dramatically every year, and it's putting tremendous pressure on your portfolios. That's why, the 68 retiree was the worst case, because they hit 2 bear markets back to back and had 10 years of very high inflation. They were just devastating. So those two factors are the most important in determining what your withdrawal rate will be.
Oh, wow. That is such fantastic gems right there, which is folks are adjusting their retirement withdrawal rate according to inflation and also current market conditions and what they're going to look like, perhaps, for the next few years in the near term, and particularly inflation, because there's strategies called guardrails, right? You can put guardrails around your portfolio in order to adjust when markets are doing fairly well, and if they're not doing well, then you can adjust this withdrawal rate with guardrails. And what I'm hearing from you is that it's okay to adjust in, kind of not in the moment, but where you are in that economic cycle and life cycle, because you may not be able to catch up to inflation in that particular year for your withdrawal rate, because like you said, it's going to be a drag. That means you may have to make some lifestyle adjustments in that particular year. So am I hearing that? It's like you have to adjust according to economic situations and also your life situations as well.
You're absolutely right. And can I mention the fact that I have created I've been in the process of writing a book where I'm putting all these ideas. Is that okay to say?
Absolutely. People want to hear from that. Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, hopefully it'll be published by the middle of next year. I have a publisher and the book's 95% done. And one of the things I look at that I haven't seen done very often is, let's say you're in retirement, you pick your number, 4.5% or 8%, wherever it is. And then it's important to, since you have a plan, basically, just like any other long range plan, it needs to be monitored. You have to keep an eye on it because it's staying within the parameters that I had hoped it would. And if it starts to depart from those parameters, what do you do about it? Very important. And I've identified a number of situations where you have to take action, and some where you're better off not taking action. For example, if you get a bear market early in retirement, it's going to knock your plan off kilter for a while, okay? And it's going to look a little bit scary. Maybe your withdrawal rate goes from 5% to 8%. You're saying, oh, everything's blowing up. Maybe I should cut back. Well, because stock markets tend to recover after they crash, that will probably come back. And the best strategy in that case may be pretty much to do nothing and assuming it's a normal stock market recovery, let the market come back. And I found in almost all cases, doing nothing is the best. However, if you hit a patch of inflation that looks like it's going to last for a while, like the 70s, that's the time to hit the panic button. My recommendation, when you have high inflation that looks like it's going to be sustained, that can be very, very damaging. That is the retiree's worst enemy. And I recommend immediate action, as you were suggesting, cut back temporarily, see what happens. If things continue to go bad, then make those cutbacks a little bit more permanent. Let's hope we don't have to deal with that. And inflation is under control, but who knows?
Right. I mean, to your point, Bill, that's a fantastic point, right? We've had high inflation the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And if you are adjusting your portfolio upwards, luckily, we can't foresee the market. That's why I say luck, but we can't foresee what the market, fortunately, let's use that word. Fortunately, the market has performed fairly well the last couple of years. And we've also had high inflation. So there is a little wiggle room to say, okay, well, I can adjust my portfolio upwards to account for inflation because I have a little bit of higher returns the last few years. But that's an optimal situation. And even in that, high withdrawal rates across the whole entirety of retirement is still not sustainable, even with multiple years of near-term market performance, right?
We've been kind of in a strange situation the last 25 years because, I indicated stock market valuation is very important in determining your withdrawal rate. And we've had expensive stock markets for almost all of the 25 years. As a result, withdrawal rates, I've been recommending people keeping toward the lower end, so the 5.25%, 5.5% range, instead of getting up to that average number. We had about 4 months in 2009 when the stock market bottom, and it was cheap when you could probably do 6.5%. But it was a very narrow window. And if you didn't retire in that window, sorry, you got stuck with something a lot less. So, strange markets. Let's hope we get an opportunity to, get, better stock market valuations and a better retirement opportunity in the near future.
Right. For sure. What are some of the misconceptions that you get frustrated with? And I'm putting words in your mouth, the word frustrated, but that you like to straighten out? Because I know you're having your new book next summer. Everybody's anticipating it because, man, this is just fabulous information. What are some of those things you're like, I want to straighten this out a little bit for everybody's well-being?
Okay. I think the first thing, of course, is thinking is 4% applies to everybody. Okay. And in my book, I'll explain it. In fact, my book is pretty much like a cookbook. It's for the non-professional to lay out a process by which they can actually prepare their own withdrawal plan, identify all the important factors for them, and get a number. And then let's look at how we manage that thing too. So that process, is very important to have. The other things, I think I like to clear up the conception too, and I think I did already. Some people thought the 4% rule means every year you take 4% of the value of your portfolio at the start of the year. That's not how it works. Once again, it's a cost of living adjustment. 4% you use the first year to determine the first year's withdrawal, then you just throw that 4% away. After that, give yourself a cost of living adjustment. I also want to mention that investors and retirees should take advantage of what I call 4 free lunches that are available to them as investors. Okay. And these are basically things that they can do with their investments that will increase their withdrawal rate, but not increase their risk. We should be doing that. The first is almost everybody knows diversification. We mentioned portfolio diversification is great. You have a lot of assets, topping out and bottoming out at different times. It considerably increases return in your portfolio. I estimate about 1.5% it adds, going from like 8.5% to 10% compounded over time. That's what my retiree portfolios have done with just an ordinary mix of diversified investments. Another thing is to be sure that you rebalance your portfolio once a year. You will also pick up some significant return by doing that. Essentially, what you're doing is every year, when you sell off investments that have done well, you're probably selling investments that are about ready to do less well and putting money into things that haven't done well and probably about to do well. We all know that investments run in cycles. So, although you can be a buy and hold investor, rebalancing gives you a little extra kick. So be sure to do that. The other is slightly tilt your investment allocation toward the higher returning assets, because they will give you higher returns in the long run, probably higher withdrawal rates. What does that mean? Small cap stocks, micro cap stocks, those earn about 2% more than U.S. large cap stocks. And you put a little bit more. Don't be piggish. Don't throw a whole portfolio into that, because that violates the rule of diversification. But doing that can also add significant withdrawal rate. And the other thing is what a couple of planners came up with a great idea to call the glide path investment. And the idea behind this is basically to start with a lower percentage of stocks in retirement when you start, like let's say 40% instead of 60, which I generally recommend, and then increase it year by year. And that actually adds about 0.25% to your withdrawal rate. So when you start adding these things all up, the 4% rule is starting to look more and more like the 5% rule as we go along. That's right. Again, I advise people to take advantage of free lunches, no extra risk and higher withdrawal rates.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, working with a financial planner, financial advisor, wealth advisor, a wealth advisor that's about their salt. Okay. And we do this at Concurrent Wealth Management, which is at that third or fourth quarter, particularly fourth quarter, we are helping folks with that allocation and taking a little bit off the table, readjusting the portfolio every year. And I like what you said there, which is, you're throwing away a little bit, not the long-term outlook or the long-term goal or outlook of either market economy or even your goals. You're not throwing that out the water. But what you're saying, let's reset and look for the next year and how that's going to help us by shaping our portfolio, taking a little off the table, right? Having a glide path. And so all of that needs to be taken care of year over year. If you just set it and forget it, then to your point, that 4% rule, it's not going to do any good if you're not having your eyeballs on the task at hand. What is you said in the free lunches, taking care of free lunches, right? I asked you about misconceptions. Other than these 4 points, what is maybe one thing? Is it psychology? What is that one thing in retirement income that instills that confidence level?
Well, once you have a plan, you have to stick to it. That's really important. And I think investors have to be very diligent that if they establish an investment plan, that they don't get frightened out of it by what happens to the market. Bear markets are scary, but they're also temporary. So if you find your portfolio takes a 20% hit, maybe a little bit more, have faith that it'll eventually come back. Now, if you start getting to be 60% or more like that, well, maybe that's something a little bit more to be concerned about, like they had in 2008. That was pretty nasty. But even then, that had a pretty strong recovery. So people just need to get a plan and stick to it, and don't be frightened out of it by, things that they see.
Right. Stick to itiveness. That is a big psychological either barrier or something that can boost your outcome if you have stick to itiveness. And a sequence of return risk was the term I was looking for a minute ago. All right. We're coming on the tail end of the show, Bill. You said that you have a book coming out next summer, and you have all this work over 30 years. What do you want the book to help people do and bring in the 4% rule to these days and times? And what do you want folks to really take away from your work now?
That I want to understand that there's a process that they can go through, which can be laid out like a recipe with ingredients. And that's what I'll be doing in my book very specifically. They can do it themselves, and then develop a plan. And it's important to have a plan going to retirement, and equally important, manage that plan during retirement. Just don't let it sit there and hope that it'll last, for 30 or 40 years. Probably will require some adjustments along the way.
Right. And it's so complex too. You said do it yourself. But there's a lot that goes into, for people devote a whole bunch of time into all aspects of retirement, sure, doing it yourself, and you can. People have the ability to, if you have the time. If you spend a couple, 2 or 3 years, doing this. That said, partnering with either education from sources like yourself, listen to this podcast, or even partner up with an advisor. I know people are like, oh, you're an advisor, Preston, so you're going to say that. Yeah, but you've been doing this 30 years.
That's right. And, I was an advisor for years, and I think your point is well made. I think people would benefit from using the services of an advisor, because this can be a complex area. And advisors can help you through that. And even more important, I think they can help you with emotional control during difficult markets, so that you don't bail out of your plan at the worst possible time.
Right, for sure. So if you have one fun question before we go here, sure. And thank you for being on the show, and again, all the work you've done for households and advisors across the country. If you had an opportunity to rename the 4% rule, have you ever thought about that, or what kind of different name you would give it?
That's a great question. Maybe I'd call it the 4% not a rule.
Oh man, that's good stuff. That's timeless. All right. Well, Bill, we thank you so much. I'll give you that our last opportunity to give one nugget takeaway that you like. Okay, take this nugget and run with it. What's that before we close out?
Keep an eye on inflation. That is the greatest threat to us. And don't be afraid to write the Federal Reserve. I've written letters to the Federal Reserve thanking them for their aggressive fight against inflation. I think, and I got a very nice reply back. So I think if citizens show an interest in their concern about inflation to the people who have a lot to do with it, maybe it'll have a beneficial effect.
Right. All right. Well, cool beans. Bill, we'll be looking out for your book next summer, right? That's when it's coming out?
That's tentatively, yes, right.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show. We really appreciate it. And folks, if you like what you've seen, heard, and feel on the show, please like and subscribe and share with your colleagues, family, and friends, and leave a comment or something like that, right? And until next time, we'll chop soon. Cheers.
Thank you, Preston.